The 2-1. Lindor towards right center field. This one is back. It is gone! Grand slam! And Lindor puts the Mets on top. The biggest swing of the season for New York.
3-second differential. Shot clock, game clock. Shot clock down to 5. Here's Towns from 3. It's gone! Karl Anthony Towns with the dagger. 3-point field goal.
Knicks regain their composure. Towns, deep 3-ball with the switch.
I'm such an idiot. I was talking to y'all with no mic on. Wow, that was horrible. I thought my mic turned on right away. That's kind of how I had it set up. So that's kind of weird. But yeah, man, we're set to go, man. We are set to go. Spring training is on the horizon. If you guys saw some of the videos that were posted on SNY for the Mets, you had Frankie Montas, Clay Holmes kind of throwing a little bullpen session right there. You have Francisco Alvarez kind of talking to the young catchers and the minors, kind of give him some tips of what he's been able to see. It's been dope. It's been 100% dope. I think the best part about it is that we're seeing a new year of Francisco Alvarez. The kid obviously struggled last year, basically trying, you saw a lot of his power, but he wasn't really that disciplined at the plate. He was really attacking outside pitches, really wasn't pulling it the other way. He was struggling with that a lot of the times. He had a lot of, I would say, like miscues behind the plate, a lot of pass balls going behind him, and you just kind of see I wouldn't say the confidence, but you were kind of wondering like where, when is Francisco Alvarez going to come back? When are we going to see the kid that we saw in 2023? This year, I felt like he's had enough to kind of take in his back pocket and be like, all right, this is what I got to work on. This is where I got to be better. I got to be more disciplined at the plate. I got to follow everything that, they're telling me. But at least I went through the struggles last year to kind of come into this year with the stakes even higher, right? Because of Juan Soto and what we did last year with no expectations being there. Being able to set the tone and kind of go in and just really be like, I could be better than what I did last year, right? So I'm really looking forward to what Francisco Alvarez is going to bring to the table this year. Shout out to Queens Baseball. For those of you that don't know, that do follow me, that don't join X, we have a little thing on X called Queens Baseball Space, Mets Twitter Space, right? Shout out to the Pope. Shout out to the accountant Josh. Shout out to Keith from Shane's Sons. They run a beautiful space. That's their thing. As you see in the bottom of the layout, I have Queens Baseball, because those are my guys. And I show love and obviously want to represent. And we all do this for the love of the Mets. And just we want to give you guys our perspective, give a platform to where we can go ahead and we can just have normal conversations. I mean, that's what the 7 Express podcast is all about, right? When I join with my guys, Chris Torres and AP. By the way, happy birthday to my guy Chris, man. Hope you're having a good one so far. I know it's pretty cold in is ugly out. So, I hope you're able to go out, have a nice dinner, enjoy it with the family, with your son, with your wife, and yeah, man, blessings to you, Brody. Hope you're having a fantastic day. But when I was able to join them two, we just wanted to have a Mets podcast out there where it was kind of like, yo, we could just sit there and not have like a show, but kind of just have regular conversation. Go out there and talk like we're in just in a regular room, right? Like we're video chatting. We just want to talk about the Mets, right? That's kind of the mindset of it, or there was the plan behind it. I know a little bit if you kind of watch our videos. It's more of a thing where it's like I'm the mediator and they're kind of the the guest per se. But it's really their host as well. They're not co-host. I look at them as host because it's their thing as well. There are gonna be days where you're gonna have just them two. I've told them, I want to have episodes where it's just y'all two, right? Have me out and go ahead and just run it, right? So hopefully down the line we'll be able to do that. Right now there's not that much to talk about, which is kind of why they haven't really done it, just them two to try to give it a try, because they're not really on the content wave like I am. So they really don't know the ins and outs like that. So they're just really trying to learn as we go. I'm not perfect at this either, but there's certain things that I kind of know that they, I guess, wanted me to help them with, and why not? Those are my guys. There's another platform where I could just eliminate the Knicks and I could just talk strictly about the Mets, right? And I could talk Mets with two guys that I'm really cool with and that know about the Mets, that know their shit from up and down. So, that's super fun. I really enjoy it. Like I said before, please go follow us at the 7 Express podcast. We're always doing lives on Friday. We have a nice video coming up for you guys that will be dropped on Friday. We may or may not have a live for you guys on Friday, depending on the situation that happens that day. We still are in the process of determining that, but usually when we don't have a recorded episode for you guys, it's every Friday we'll have a live at 8:45 p.m. So make sure you tune in and check us out there. We are on YouTube, on X, on Instagram, and yeah, we're shooting lives every Friday at 8:45 on YouTube and on X. So we got a lot of things to talk about. And, like I said, there's not really much to talk about now besides guys coming into spring training and kind of just getting their reps in. But when the season starts and we get underway, there will be a lot to talk about, because every game is a must watch. Not every game is going to be, big. Not every game is going to be crazy, but we'll be able to break down almost every game that we watch for you guys. And just like I said, break it down, have our opinions, have our discussions, and just talk as if we were in a regular room, in a regular circle, just discussing. That's kind of what the mindset is. We're trying to really put it as a show, but it's super fun. Like I said, you guys should definitely check it out. It's me, Chris Torres, and AP from Queens Baseball, from X as well. And, shout out to the other Met content creators that really do this thing. I say it nonstop. I show them love, and I show them support. Shea and Sons, Till Mets Do Us Part, Mets Weekly, Subway to Shea, so many Wardy, Mets Wardy, so many Met content creators that really do this shit from ins and outs, do it on a consistent basis, that really put in the time in the day and that get the traction that they get and the traction that they deserve. They put in the work and they give you guys the best Mets content that they could give you, and it's top notch, man. And again, I don't think I'd be in this position in terms of trying to do Met content and really just talking about the team that I love so much and the sport that I love so much, if it wasn't for those guys, because I was in a bind in terms of content ideas and how I wanted to set things up and what I really wanted to do with the brand of Top Bunk Sports. And when I was watching videos from those guys, especially from Shea and Sons, I mean, shout out to Keith, man. They do an unbelievable job. Please go follow them at Shea and Sons on YouTube, X, Instagram, TikTok. They do an unbelievable job of just trying to, cover the game and really trying to just combine things together in terms of Mets content creators, man. They really helped me, and they've really given me so much advice and so much just time, just so much time, and they've been really supportive of just me doing what I wanted to do in terms of content. So shout out to those guys, man. They're on their way. 600 followers already, and yeah, man, they're doing it big, man. 2025 is going to be super big for them, so please give them a shout out at Shea and Sons. Two things before obviously we go into the nature of the David Stearns press conference. The one thing is the Mets bring back Drew Smith on a 1-year deal, includes a club option for 2026. And I don't want to say I'm happy about it. I'm not a Drew Smith fan. I thought he was done after this year. I said, I don't think the Mets are going to bring him back. I don't think the Mets want anything to do with him. I don't think he's anybody's favorite. But hey, with the options that we have now at the bullpen is obviously loaded with right-handed pitchers. You can obviously bring them back and kind of take that risk with them now, because we're kind of loaded with right-handed pitching. So you can take that chance with him. It's not like your bullpen is thin right now and you got to rely on him as like we did in the past. So, hopefully if it does work out for him, it does. If it doesn't, hey, I didn't want him anyways, but he's here. So, that's one of the news that came out, but just reported from John Heyman like a couple seconds ago. Pete Alonso has officially signed with the New York Mets. He did his physical, and because that's awesome, the New York Mets Twitter account posted this to kind of confirm that it is official. So I will post this up here for you guys to see. Just 1 second. Obviously, we're doing this in real time, so I excuse me if it's kind of slowing down a little bit, but this is pretty dope. It is official, as John Heyman reported, and obviously with the video that they're playing right now, the New York Mets have confirmed it. I will share it in the screen right now. Here you go.
Swing on a fly ball to 3-1 to Alonso. Williams sets. Here's the pitch. Swing on a fly ball to right field. Pretty well hit. Frelick back at the wall. He jumps. It's gone. He did it. He did it. Pete Alonso with the most memorable home run of his career. Pumps his fist as he rounds second. It's a 3-run homer. He's given the Mets a 3-2 lead. They all pour out of the dugout. Alonso on his way to home plate. They're waiting for him. He hits the plate. He is first congratulated by Nimmo, hugged by Lindor. There are a dozen Mets waiting for him outside the dugout. Pete Alonso keeps this fairy tale.
So as you see, everybody's hyped. Yeah, I don't care about that guy. But, everybody's hyped. Everybody's, celebrating as, it's official. His physical is done. I know we were talking about it. We were kind of like, yo, what's going on with his physical? Obviously, they were talking about it, and Carlos Mendoza had his press conference yesterday and basically, said when he gets his physical done, I'll have a conversation with him and all that. So that's dope. As you saw, there, I will have the press conference here. You saw kind of the format. I'll show you guys the format one more time. So I'll be here. I'll have the press conference right here. And, if for the 13 that is in here, shout out to you guys, man. I know it was out of nowhere. Usually when I do a live or when I drop a video, I kind of, post it in advance and, you guys are able to watch it. If not, you watch it later. But yeah, I'll have the live here and we'll be able to just listen in. I'll give, some of my takes on based on, what he has said. I'm sure they're going to ask him about the Alonso situation and how that's been able to get done after the comments that him and Steve Cohen made at Amazing Day. So that's going to be pretty interesting. I'm sure they're going to ask him about that. Obviously, they're going to probably ask him about Acuna. They're going to ask him about the situation at second base, Brett Beatty. They'll probably ask him about Soto. They'll probably ask him about, the rotation, Senga. There's going to be a couple questions that they'll probably ask him that a lot of us want answers to. I personally believe, and I do want to touch on, for those of you that haven't heard me yet, I'll touch on this whole situation that Carlos Mendoza said about Brett Beatty. First of all, Mendoza had a nice press conference. It was good to see him. A lot of good questions that they were asking. Somewhere, but then again, those are SNY reporters that don't know what the fuck they're asking. So you start scratching your head. But overall, it was a nice press conference. Like I said, it was good to hear from him. The one thing that I wanted to touch on that kind of had me confused was the situation with Brett Beatty. Now, obviously, when Mendoza was asked about that, he basically said he's going to get some reps at second base, but they solely want to look at him at third base. My issue with that is you already have Jeff McNeil, who a lot of people already don't like, but he's here for a reason. He's a veteran. He's still on the contract for, I think, 2 more years or another year. I got to look that up, so don't quote me on that, but I think those are the 2 numbers. So he's going to play. He's a utility player. He will find himself probably in the outfield, maybe, depending how that situation goes with Marte, Jesse Winker, and all that and whatnot, right? As well as Tyrone Taylor, depending on how the Jose Siri thing holds up, all that. Then you got Luis Angel Acuna. Now, with Luis Angel Acuna and Brett Beatty, that factors depending on what happens in spring training, right? Because if Luis Angel Acuna gets hot and just goes off, there's no way you deny that. There's no way you deny the guy a spot in on opening day. Like I just don't think that you shout out to Jacob in here in the chat. Appreciate you. I don't think you deny him that. I don't think you take that away from him. Same thing goes for Brett Beatty, right? My thing though with Brett Beatty is he's been here more than Acuna, yet he hasn't shown the consistency to stay up here. But every time he goes down to AAA, he's hitting like fucking Barry Bonds. So with Acuna, even though he was up here since September and he kind of showed something in September, he kind of showed what he's capable of. He got on a good groove. So then now it's kind of like, okay, what they both kind of get a start, like what like they get the same start, or who holds an advantage over the other? You know what I'm saying? And I think Acuna deserves that more than Brett Beatty does. Now the third base situation is funny because when he did say he's looking at him more solely on the third base spot, you're kind of asking yourself, like, in what world why would that work? The only way that would work is if, knock on wood, Mark Vientos gets hurt, or knock on wood, Pete Alonso gets hurt, and then you have to move Mark Vientos to first. Now you're talking about a situation where Brett Beatty goes to third. Mendoza, however, also did say that they are looking for Acuna to get some reps at third. Now, reps are reps. Guys are going to get reps. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to play there. But knowing this team and knowing how when they look at reps, it's a situation where I'm looking at a player, he's getting reps at this position that he normally doesn't get or he's not known for. He looks good here. We're going to try something there. Acuna, to me, should be an everyday second baseman. Again, and my infield, to me, is always going to be Francisco Lindor at shortstop, Mark Vientos at third base, Acuna at second base, and then Pete Alonso at first. And to me, I don't think that Acuna should be having a rep at third. I mean, you want to get him some reps at third base? Cool, go ahead, just so he could be ready. But this does not mean that he should be playing at third base for the most part. It doesn't. It wraps back to Brett Beatty. What the hell are they going to do with this kid, right? Because now you're giving him another chance in spring training, but it's like he really doesn't have anywhere to play. I don't put him over Luis Angel Acuna. I don't. The only way that's possible is if Luis Angel Acuna shits the bed completely. Honestly, I don't see that happening. Now, if he does, he does. But I just don't see it. I don't. So it's gonna be interesting to see what they do. They have options, which is great, but you're basic. I personally do not want Acuna to be here, does kills it in spring training, and then has to go back down to AAA. I don't. When you can use him, he's younger. He already has a taste of what it is to play with Vientos and Lindor in the infield. Like, why not take that chance? Ronnie's not even ready, so you can forget about Ronnie at this point. Shout out to my guy Macho. I know that's your guy, bro, but we heard what Carlos Mendoza said yesterday about him. He's not ready. He's not ready. So my main focus right now is looking into Luis Angel Acuna as your second baseman right now. I know, again, Jeff McNeil. I get it, veteran, cool, but use that veteran status as a utility player. Come off the bench from time to time, because you're not it, brother. Like, unless he goes off in the first half of the season and you just can't sit him down, like, which I doubt. I don't see it happening. I don't see him duplicating 2022. 2022 for him was a special year, batting champion, cool, whatever. I don't see him duplicating that again. I may be crazy, but hey, anything can happen in baseball. I just don't see it. And right now, you're in a position where you got two young guys in Brett Beatty and Luis Angel Acuna fighting for that spot, which I don't think it should be in that case. But they still see something in him where they're like, we're going to give him an opportunity, right? And we're going to test him out either at third, or we're going to test him out at second base, which he has played in AAA. He has played a couple games at second base. So it's not like he's entering second base on a whole new scale. He has played second base in AAA, so he kind of has an idea of what it is compared to third base. It's just a matter of how that's going to work, because like I said, anything can happen in baseball, and Brett Beatty and Acuna can both go off at the same time. Now you're sitting there, if you're Carlos Mendoza and you're David Stearns and you're Steve Cohen, and you're like, what the fuck do we do? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, what option do we have? Personally, even if Brett Beatty does go off, brother, you're a trade piece in my eyes. You're a trade piece because he's had more than 500 at bats. That's it. He's not a baby no more. So at this point, you're like, yo, instead of us wasting your time in the minors, let's see if we could trade him, right? I can't personally think. I know it sounds stupid. You're like, all right, Top, what's the trade piece? I can't personally think of a trade piece right now, right? So it's going to be kind of stupid for me to say that and not think of something, not think of a solution. But I do think in a trade per se, if you can move him and you can go ahead and you can, put him in on a team where they can utilize him. He's still young. He can play almost every day. His talents ain't being wasted. That would be beneficial. You cannot keep these kids, man. You can't keep these kids and they don't come up here. It's not gonna work. It's not gonna work. So it's like you need to do something. You need to move them. You gotta something gotta happen. I'm looking here, right, as we get ready to get started with this press conference. Like I said, 4:30. I will post it up here too, and I will read it for you guys. Alex Cohen and Steve Cohen have issued a statement on the Alonso signing. I will post that up right now as we speak. Why read it when you guys could just see it for yourselves? So give me 1 second as we get ready. Like I said, everything is on live time right now because we're trying to watch the live. So I will read it for you guys. It says, Steve and Alex Cohen on the re-signing of Pete Alonso. Quotes, we are excited to welcome Pete back to Queens. He is a homegrown talent who is adored by our fan base. It should be a fun summer at Citi Field watching Pete contribute to a great lineup and chase the franchise home run record. David Stearns has also said Pete is a great Met and one of the league's elite power threats. I'm thrilled that we reached an agreement, and I'm looking forward to watching Pete help anchor our lineup. So there you go. Front heads in our front office have made a statement on the signing, and man, I'm like I said, I'm excited. I'm glad that everything was worked out. They finally got the physical going, and we're able to just get back to just enjoying Pete Alonso, homegrown Met, and really just 3 years, obviously an opt out after the first, and I'm just happy he's here. The negotiations, I mean, you heard it from Steve Cohen himself at Amazing Day. Exhausting. And you were always wondering what the hell is going on. You know what I'm saying? Like once you saw Paul Goldschmidt, Carlos Santana, you saw Christian Walker sign, like these guys fell off the board like that, almost like the same day, right? I think Christian Walker was like a day before, 2 days before when he signed with the Astros. Like you saw them fall all at once, and then you're just wondering, like, yo, the fuck is happening with Pete? And then it goes from, yo, what's happening to, all right, brother, you got to stop this nonsense, right? Because nobody thought he was worth what he wanted. And it was just like a back and forth with the Mets in terms of like, yo, who's going to budge? Who's going to go and who's going to walk away, or who's going to stay and who's going to try to get this shit done? And the Mets always wanted him back. He always wanted to be here. If you read that article from John Heyman, he wanted to be here. He never wanted to leave. But I'm sure both sides wanted to make sure that a deal was done and it was done correctly. And of course, it took a while. I didn't think it was going to be that long, right? We were saying during the season, once this off season starts, we hope that we don't get an off season like we got last year when we were waiting for Shohei Ohtani to sign and Yamamoto to sign. They took. It was a boring offseason, I'll tell you that much. So we were hoping that it didn't linger that long, and it kind of did with Pete. And you were just getting to I'm not going to speak for everybody else, but I was getting to a point where, dude, if he signs elsewhere, I don't give a shit. Like I'm completely done with the brother. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm done. Like I don't really want to deal with that. So glad that we could finally come to an agreement, man. I'm happy that he's here, man, and I can't wait to really get things going. Oh, my bad. I thought I saw the live for a second, and was gonna put it up there. Let me just see. It's 4:30 now. Let me just look at the Mets SNY real quick and see where this is at. So then that way I could just post everything for you guys and get everything under control. Nothing here, right? So nothing yet. So we'll be waiting. But yeah, man, shout out to Queens Baseball. Like I said again, they're running a space right now. Shout out to the 33 that is in here, man. Appreciate you guys joining. If some of you guys that are on Queens Baseball that you guys are watching, man, I appreciate you. Y'all my guys, man. Like I said, please go follow my guy Chris Torres from the 7 Express podcast that we do. AP as well. Follow the Pope Rube. Follow the accountant Josh. Follow Keith from Shane Sons. Man, follow those guys, man. They run a beautiful Met space called Queens Baseball Space. Like I said, I always got to show love and represent. On the bottom here, Queens Baseball. So please show those guys love. Let me see 1 second if this thing is on, because like I said, I know it said 4:30. So let me just double check one more time. It might not be. It's at 4:30, so I don't know. I don't know what's going on. Let me see. Let me see. Was that today? It is today, yeah. 4:30. Yep. So they haven't started it yet. So we'll see. We'll see how that goes. We'll see what time this starts. But once it gets started, I will have it up here for you guys, like I said. But yeah, man, Pete Alonso's back. We got a lot of things to mesh with. Actually, while we're waiting, what I will do is I will go on SNY and we will look at some videos. Actually, you know what? Speaking of that, because obviously there's nothing going on right now. I haven't found anything yet. So while we're waiting for that, give me 1 second, guys. While we're waiting for that, I will show you guys some videos of spring training. And I think that will be fun. Just as I don't know, for those of you that haven't watched it, we can definitely take a look at that. So let me look at that as we go. 1 second, guys. Let's see, SNY. Again, everything is in live time. So if you guys are wondering why not everything is, oh, wait a minute. We might be ready. Yep, here we go. Forget the videos. The press conference will start soon. So let me put that up for you guys here. as we go. Yes, sir. Here we go. Here we go. Yep.
At the end, that finally got it across the finish line.
Look, I think both parties want to get it done, and that's a really good foundation for a deal. We're thrilled to have Pete back. I think Pete is thrilled to be back. He was here briefly the other day for his physical. And you could see the genuine excitement that he had to be back in this building, and we're really happy we were able to make it happen.
There's been a lot of talk about the meeting you guys had in Tampa with Steve and Scott and Pete and yourself. What was the key message that you as an organization wanted to get across to him in that meeting?
I think we just wanted to ensure that he knew we wanted him back. And I think he wanted to express the same to us. I think he wanted to express his desire to come back. And it was important, I think, for both sides to hear that. These are long negotiations. There's a lot of back and forth. And if you're going to make a deal, I think it's important for both sides to really feel and hear that both sides are very invested in the deal.
Why do you think, if not those wires got crossed, why do you think there was maybe an uncertainty from either side that, this was a marriage that you both wanted to happen?
Look, it's a long negotiation, and I think you never really know how free agent processes are going to play out. And so Pete had earned the right to evaluate different opportunities. We were certainly active in the free agent market this year in a variety of different ways. And so ultimately, I think both sides felt like this was the right resolution, and we're certainly really happy we got there.
Around the time that you guys signed Winker, and I think Minter was around that same time, did you think at that time that Pete was still going to be a Met? How realistic was it in your mind?
I didn't know. I at that point in time, I would have said that there was a very real possibility that he was going to end up elsewhere. But ultimately, we're thrilled that we were able to continue discussions and get a deal done.
What did you make of the way the market overall valued Pete Alonso?
I don't really make much of it. I think free agency can be kind of a weird thing, and players can be valued differently by the market in free agency at different points in the same offseason, certainly valued differently by the market in different off seasons. So this is kind of where it landed, and we're really pleased to be able to bring him back.
Well, acknowledging that the roster is always evolving over the course of the full season, do you expect that you're pretty much done off-season work-wise as far as key additions, major additions?
I think so. Look, we're always going to be involved in conversations. We're always going to be trying to see if there are ways we can get better. We also feel really good about the group we have that's reporting right now, and I would anticipate, by and large, this is the team we're going forward with.
Hey, David, why ultimately was short-term the right arrangement for the Pete Alonso deal?
I think for both sides, just given how we were looking at it, how Pete was looking at it, each side's going to have different objectives. And clearly the length of contract is one objective, AAV is another objective. And you try different structures on either side. And this was the combination of AAV, structure, and length that overlap for both sides. And I think it works well for both sides.
David, there's a perception, fair or not, that you personally didn't want Pete back, but Steve pushed hard for it. Why did David Stearns think Pete should be back here as the Mets first baseman?
Yeah, he makes us a better team. I mean, there's no question he makes us a better team. We're in a spot where we feel like we've got a really good team. We're trying to win as many games as possible. Pete makes us better.
As far as that position, I mean, Pete's kind of become, an anomaly a little bit because teams kind of shift guys in and out of there. Are you comfortable with having kind of that traditional slugger type in their
Yeah,
offense.
with a player who produces at the level that Pete produces, absolutely.
Dave, I think about 2 weeks before it got done, you guys were at Amazing Day at the Fan Fest, and Steve made no bones about saying that he didn't like the structure, he didn't like the negotiations. In 2 weeks, how much heavy lifting did that have to get that down to a place that you were comfortable with? Was that a lot of coming down on their side, or did you feel like it was more coming together thing?
I think it's coming together, and it's both sides sincerely working towards an objective. I think what Steve felt, what Steve said was very authentic, and it's the way he felt. And at times during negotiations, you're going to have disagreements. And we were at a point in the negotiation where there's a pretty significant disagreement about what we were looking at, and Steve expressed that. But we kept working at it, and they kept working at it, and ultimately we got to a good spot.
Steve is, I mean, I guess still relatively new comparatively since he bought the team at doing what he does. You've been a long time in this baseball game. Was that weird to see your owner say that in like a public setting like that, or?
No, I look, Steve wants to be transparent. Not every owner does. And so there are clearly rules that govern what we can say. And so I think what Steve did was be as transparent as he possibly could without breaking any rules. And I applaud him for doing it and appreciate him doing that.
Hey, Dave. How was that for you to work with an owner that from our perspective seems to be very active in negotiations and wants to be at the negotiating table? Is that something that you had to deal with in Milwaukee, for example? And just how does that work for someone like you?
I think Steve is very invested in ensuring that players know that we want them, and is very invested in having a personal relationship with the player. And that's what he expresses in these negotiations. I think that's why it is important for him to meet with players. Like we met with Juan Soto, going down and talking to Steve, to Pete, I think just accentuates the personal touch that he and Alex want to place on the team, want to place on the organization. And from my perspective, that's an enormous benefit for the organization.
Just on a kind of a side note, Mark mentioned today that he's going to continue taking reps at first. Do you guys envision Pete playing 162 over at first base like he did last year? Or do you want to see some guys kind of share the load over there?
Look, I don't know that we ever go into a season expecting a player to play 162. That is really tough to do. I imagine Pete is going to do everything in his power to play 162, but we also have to be prepared for what happens and the randomness that happens over the course of a major league season.
Pete's had a couple relatively strange seasons, like for him at least. One year his batting average was down. Last year home runs were down a little bit, but his batting average was back up. What do you make of his last two seasons, and what leads you to believe that he can get back on sort of a more normal track for him these next few?
He's a really motivated player right now.
Good question.
He's a very motivated player to have an elite Pete Alonso season. And I expect we're going to see that. I think he's very confident in his abilities, and I'm excited to watch it.
David, he played under the pressures of a walk year last year as well. You're placing him right back in that situation, essentially. What makes you comfortable doing that with him?
Look, I don't personally think, and we can ask him, I personally don't think the walk year impacted him. I mean, I never got the sense that contractual pressures were impacting him last year. Certainly, this is a player who has repeatedly proven in big moments he can play under pressure. He's played in New York his entire career and handled the pressure. So that frankly for me is not of concern at all.
Why is
in your words, Pete Alonso so motivated to have an elite Pete Alonso year?
Look, I think he wants to win. I mean, I think what he expressed to us is he wants to win a World Series as a Met.
Duh.
He knows
Like, what type
a
of
big
question?
part of our ability to do that
The
is
first
making
dumb
sure
question that I've heard.
I think Pete's had good years the last couple of years, but not as good, not as elite, not at the standard that he set at the front end of his career. And I think he is very motivated to demonstrate that he is capable of putting up those types of numbers.
In response to the free agency ad, you mean?
No, not necessarily. I think
Is he more motivated now than he was a year ago?
I don't think so. I mean, you can ask him that, but I think Pete's a pretty motivated player, and regardless of how this offseason played out for him, I think he was going to come into this year wanting to win a lot of games, wanting to win a World Series, and I think that's the player we're getting.
How did his social club compare to some of the other places you've closed deals?
We didn't actually close it there, but it was pretty impressive. It was pretty impressive. That was a unique meeting setting, and a cool spot.
What is this, just in terms of, I know you guys have your internal projections of what the team is supposed to do. How do you feel like you are stacking up right now against the Phillies, against the Braves, against the top team?
It's going to be really tight. I mean, this is a really good division. The Braves and the Phillies are two very good teams. We think we're a very good team. We got our work cut out for us. There's no question about that. This is a very, very good division. We got a ton of respect for those two teams, and we got to go out and perform at a really high level to be right there with them.
Do you feel like you have the tools to be better than them?
I feel like we can be better with them, but there's nothing guaranteed. I mean, we got to go out and perform. The Braves are going to win more games than they won last year. The Phillies are a really good team that's going to be highly motivated again this year. So we know the battle we're about to enter. I think we're excited by it, but we know it's going to take a very strong effort from our entire roster.
For a long time, I think every team's goal at the start of spring training was to win their division. Given the expanded postseason, that winning the NL East has not proven beneficial to the last couple teams that did it. Is that still as big as primary goal as it used to be?
Look, I think the first round bye is a big deal, and I know it hasn't always proven that way in this new playoff format. I think over time, we get into a 10, 15-year stretch of this, and we will see that being a big deal. So I still think that's a big deal. The biggest deal is getting in. Like, you want to keep playing, regardless of how you do it, but being able to skip the first round is a big deal.
And then in your second year, does this roster feel any more like a David Stearns team or a David Stearns organization than it did last year?
Look, I don't think we're ever going to get to like a point where it's a David Stearns team or a David Stearns organization. Like, this is the compilation of a number of different people, a number of different regimes, contributing to where we are right now. And look, I think we're going into the season with a pretty good team. We're also far from a perfect team. We're going to continue to work to get better. We're going to ask a lot of our players. We're going to challenge our players to get better. And just like every season, we're going to do our best to make upgrades where we can throughout the season.
How close, if at all, were you to bringing back Iglesias this winter? And it seems at this point that maybe you've moved on. What's going on? What's going into that decision?
Yeah, I think where we are now, for that role on our team, it's important for us to keep some avenues open for some of our younger players. We think it's important for us to have some roster flexibility with that spot. It's really tough to freeze your entire position player roster We did that for a portion last year, and we actually kind of got away with it. But there very easily could have been a circumstance where we got stuck with a completely frozen position player roster. And so having some flexibility there in that role is frankly probably needed for us right now.
Dave, how has your teamwork with Steve been so far? I mean, he brings a certain element to it. You bring a certain element to it. It seems like you guys work together pretty well in figuring out what would be a good deal for Pete Alonso. Do you think you guys have done a pretty good job complimenting each other in the past year plus that you've been?
Yeah, I've enjoyed working for Steve. I mean, he's been a tremendously supportive owner. He cares deeply about winning. He cares deeply about this organization. When you're sitting in my job, that's all you could ask for. And he's providing us every resource we could need to put a consistently very high caliber team on the field.
What kind of down roster implications does the move of bringing Pete back, kind of for some of the younger guys, kind of closing up a hole? What does that kind of impact have on the roster as a whole?
Sure. Look, it's a spot that is now guaranteed to go to one player, and so there's a little bit less. There's one fewer open spots on the roster, and so that is going to impact some of our young players. Look, they understand it. We've talked to them about it. It creates probably a little bit more competition here in camp. We also know, and I talk about it every year, the roster on opening day is a roster for one day. We're going to go through 60 plus players, and we're going to need all of them to contribute over the course of a season. And so I would imagine all of these young players that are in the mix for this final spot or two on the roster, are going to impact our team in a material way over the course of the year, even if it's not on opening day.
How do the internal projections for the 2025 Mets right now compared to what your internal projections were a year ago?
I'm not going to comment on our internal projections or what we're looking at. I'll say I think we're a pretty good team. I like where we are as a team, and I'm looking forward to watching us play.
How do you feel about the team now versus the team a year ago? Do you like it better on paper? Not as much? About the same?
I'll speak as an organization. I like where we are as an organization today. I think we've taken steps forward as an organization in the entirety, and that's inclusive of where our major league team is at. Where that ultimately ends up 7-8 months from now, really tough for me to predict, but I like where our organization is. I like where our major league team is. I'm excited for camp. And really excited to just get this going and watch baseball.
Sort of jumping off there, where do you think the organization has made strides, and where would you like to see it continue to make strides?
Yeah, I'd like to think we've made strides across the board in our operation. I'm very pleased with where we are from a player development standpoint. Some of the processes we've implemented there, some of the people we've brought in have been very happy with our amateur scouting work over the past year. I think we had a really quality draft last year, and that's something that's going to become continuously important, but also continuously difficult as we pick farther and farther down, and where our payroll is and is likely to continue to be. We're losing 10 spots every year in the draft, and so finding good major league players farther down the draft becomes very important for us. So, I think we also recognize the work is never done. And there are 29 other really smart clubs competing every single day to try to get better as well. But I'm excited about where we are. I like the group we have in the front office, and looking forward to continuing to work with them.
You guys obviously took some big swings, landed some big players in the winter, but there may be an outside perception that you guys didn't do a whole lot when it came to the starting rotation. How do you view the starting staff right now? Just what are your overall thoughts on the depth coming into spring training?
Yeah, I will say I feel much better about our starting pitching depth sitting here today than I did a year ago. We made that a priority. of our offseason. We brought in a number of players at all levels of free agency. I think we're at least coming into camp in a pretty good health spot. Doesn't mean we're going to stay healthy throughout the entire season. We know that doesn't happen, but we're coming into camp in a pretty good health spot. And so I feel good about our starting pitching depth.
David, with the announcement that you guys are bringing Drew back as well today, you've got a few pitchers that had Tommy John surgery mid-season last year. The typical timetable would basically rule them out for this season as well, but with the advancements in some of the surgical techniques, the braces, are there more avenues for those guys to be considered potential options this year?
Look, I think with Drew, potentially in September, we don't want to rush this. Like we got to get it right. Have a better feel for that as we get into the summer months. So, I think that's possible, although we're not going to count on that. With Christian Scott, our plan is, he's not going to pitch in competition this year. So we'll use this year to make sure we get him right, and then have him full go in 26. Alzolay, unlikely. Yeah, unlikely this year. That's more of 26.
With Drew back, what's the value of just keeping him with the organization? Obviously this year being kind of a full rehab for him.
Yeah, he's been a long tenured Met who's given a lot to the organization, is a good teammate, is a good pitcher. And so I think having continuity in his care, that he can be under our supervision for his rehab in a place that he's comfortable, where he trusts the medical staff, is important for both sides. And then hopefully this goes well and he's pitching big innings for us in 26.
You mentioned earlier the whole luxury tax, losing 10 spots in the draft thing. Payroll-wise, you guys ended up in the low, going on mid 300s, I believe, by the public estimations. Steve has said he doesn't want to go there every year.
Yeah.
How did where you guys have ended up now compare to sort of the early off-season conversations you guys had about options you had?
Yeah, I think going into any offseason, there are always different scenarios. So depending on who you're able to sign, who you're able to access, sort of dictates what level of payroll you're ultimately going to have. So this was certainly a scenario that we discussed. And there were other scenarios with lower payroll numbers that we discussed as well. You're right. I don't think as an organization we want to remain consistently this high. But in this offseason, given the opportunities that were in front of us, we had tremendous ownership support to get there. And I'm really grateful for that.
Are there any scenarios with a higher number?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, look, we plot out everything and anything. In this case, this was probably among the higher of the scenarios we plotted out. And I think the general path that this offseason took is one that makes sense for the organization at this time.
What do you think of what the Dodgers have done, not only in total payroll, but in one case, in Sasaki's case, luring in a guy who
about the Dodgers, brother. Nobody cares about
done a really
Dodgers,
good job.
brother.
That's an organization that has had tremendous continuity now for over a decade. I think on all sides of their operation, they're run.
Almost like they got nothing else to add. So what do you think? What do you think?
And so,
who cares, bro? World Series. Everybody knows
that's great competition for us.
Is about beat
they're
them.
a good organization, good team.
Who cares? What David Stearns is saying right now is what you should expect him to say. It shouldn't be nothing.
You guys went for Yamamoto the previous off season, but what do you think about the perception that you probably like less the really long-term deals for even the star free agent pitchers? Because it didn't seem like there were three of them out there or more, and you didn't really play.
What I'd say is, it's, and I understand that perception is out there. It's always individual. Like we're always evaluating the individual and trying to understand what makes sense for the organization. We have approached starting pitchers on long-term deals. Clearly not at values that that secured them for us, but we don't have lines in the sand. We don't have hard and fast rules. I think we have philosophies. I think we try to do our best to be informed about sort of what the evidence is suggesting for us, but we're not drawing a line in the sand. And when there are players of any position that we think are worth the long-term investment in the construct of all the other investments we have with our club, we'll pursue them.
Based on what Tim said, I think based on the two teams' resources and the way people look at it on the outside, that you guys are in a sort of like arms race with the Dodgers. You compete for a lot of the same players. You have a lot of money. Do you guys look across the country and see what the Dodgers are doing, or do you guys try to focus more on your own division, the rivals? Like, how do you guys look at that sort of thing?
Competition-wise, both. We're not ignoring the Dodgers. I mean, we understand who they are in our game right now, and the success they've had, and that's great. But our primary focus needs to be on ourselves and how can we put the best team forward possible? How can we continue to improve organizationally in all aspects to have the type of continuity and sustained success that the Dodgers and some other organizations in our league have had. I think we're on the path to doing that. Thank you.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. From the horse's mouth himself, David Stearns said what he said. And yeah, man. I mean, we got some pretty good detail there in terms of what we wanted to hear. Obviously, Jose Iglesias is not going to be back. So that's number one. I think he spoke very, very firmly about that. We also got some detail on Alonso, and of course, like I had said before the live started, they were gonna ask him about that. I figured it was gonna be right away because they just made the fucking deal official. So obviously, he said didn't make much of the market when they spoke about the market. He said it was when it came to the contract structure, it was a combination of AAV and length. And them just coming to an understanding of what made sense for the organization, right? Everything that I wrote down is paraphrasing, but I think it was important that I took notes on this just to kind of understand it, especially doing this. By the way, I had no idea that I fucking put a B instead of an N. So my apologies on that. If y'all probably looked at that and was like, what the fuck? Did you just put a B instead of an N? I kind of did this on a rush because I actually had the idea of doing this live while I was at work. So my apologies on that. I hate making errors like that. I think we kind of all agree on this. He said that Pete makes us better, and that's 100% fact. Pete Alonso makes the New York Mets better in this lineup with him trending upwards defensively, the power that he provides, and then you never want to lose a guy like that who had the postseason that he had. Obviously, I'd say it was magical. It wasn't enormous crazy, but the game 3 wild card game winning home run that he hit, obviously the home runs that he hit in the NLDS, and the home run that he hit in game 5 to kind of start us off and give us the win. Those were key, man. Those were definitely key. It was a really good look, and it kind of helped him out in terms of how you look at Alonso now after kind of struggling in the season. Better numbers than he had last year, right? But it was still a struggle in terms of what we know Alonso can do. So for him to say that, and I think that's something that we all agreed on, and that was I think I wasn't shocked by that. They asked him questions about the teams in the division. He says he has respect for the Braves and the Phillies, and they got their work cut out for them. I'm glad that he was honest about that. Obviously, as a fan, I know we can beat Philly. I know we can beat Atlanta, but he's not gonna come out and be like, yo, they're trash and we're better than them. He understands that at the end of the day, they're still good teams and they gotta get past them to get to where they want. Believes that a first round bye in the playoffs is a big deal, and it is. You saw exactly what happened when the Dodgers got their first round bye, and you saw exactly what happened when the Yankees got their first round bye. Both teams in the World Series. You know, a lot of people were saying, well, are there, you know, days off in the first round bye, is that going to contribute to them? Is that going to hurt them? And it didn't. It didn't. So David Stearns obviously understands the importance of it. And to me, obviously, I think to everybody else that understands this, it's winning a division. You know what I'm saying? It's winning a division. He obviously says it is important to get in there no matter how they do it. So if that's winning the division, if that's getting into the wild card, it's important that you get in, right? But I think the main goal now with Juan Soto and kind of bringing certain guys back, bringing Pete back, having Jose Siri, a monster back for the bottom of the lineup, you want to win that division. And if you look at that rotation, they are, you know, with the bullpen that's been restructured, it's a big piece for that. And they're looking at a lot of consistency from that rotation to help, especially with the consistency of the lineup that we expect to have. He says that the Mets are far from a perfect team and will make upgrades to be better. Obviously, you know, within the trade deadline, depending on how we start, that is a key thing. They may not be the same team that we saw in the beginning of the year. We might go into the trade deadline and trade a couple pieces, you know what I'm saying, depending on how this team plays out. I've always said it, baseball is a weird sport. I love the sport to death. That is my number one sport. That's my life. But it is a weird sport because anything can happen. Anything can happen in any sport. But with baseball, anything can happen. That is a code that everybody lives by when it comes to the sport. Anything can happen. So we might have a projected lineup, but we may not get off to the start that we expect to have. Like last year, the start, we didn't think that the start that we got off to was going to be that bad. And we got up to the start that we did. By the time the second half came up, by the time we got into the All-Star break, we were like 27-36. They came back from the All-Star break, bam, they picked it up. They did not lose a fucking momentum. So again, it's important how you start, but it's also important how you finish. So, you know, with the upgrades that they make, depending on how the team is, it's going to be very important. It's going to be very big. He spoke about the Jose Iglesias thing. Now, I had a feeling they were going to ask him. I honestly didn't know what he was going to say because he's still a free agent out there. So maybe they had interest in bringing him back, but he flat out said no. He flat out said that avenue is going to be kept for the younger guys, and it's gonna be kept for a flexible roster. And that tells me that they can go into a route of, like I was talking before, they can definitely say, hey, McNeil, utility, Luis Angel Acuna, our primary second baseman. Same thing can happen with Brett Beatty. I don't like that, but that's the route that they most likely will be going. I won't go through all of these because obviously you guys just heard what he was saying, but I just wanted to point out certain things that were important for us to kind of understand. Believes that the organization has made strides on player development, amateur scouting, and had quality drafts. Now, obviously, when they're talking about the payroll and having a high payroll, that affects a lot, right? Shout out to the guys that I know on Queens Baseball that kind of broke down to me what, you know, obviously you want a Juan Soto, but giving him that type of money, why that is kind of a bad situation in terms of payroll. And it's not saying that, it's a bad thing to get him. They're just saying that, you understand that if you give him that type of contract, you're in a high payroll, which means you're losing down on high draft picks. And he said it right then and there. He said, I don't believe that we will be at a high payroll consistently every year. And David Stearns and Steve Cohen have both said that they don't see how that will manage every year. They obviously look to lower the payroll at a certain time. When that time will be, who knows? Right now they're in contention to win, so the window for winning is very, very questionable in terms of how that's going to go within the payroll. Do they got to keep adding to the payroll? Are they going to keep the same guys that they have this year, depending on how the season goes? Decisions need to be made, right? So however that works, depending on how this team plays out. Because if they go back into the NLCS and they lose in a game 6 or game 7, then what you're basically saying, is we got to keep this going. You got to keep it going anyways, because you're in the prime of Francisco Lindor, and you're in the prime of Juan Soto right now. So it's like those are your two, and you're in the prime of Pete Alonso. Your three best juggernauts on this team right now. You gotta put in a winning product as much as you can. So depending on how they do that, it's gonna vary, and we'll definitely see how that works out. Another thing that I took out of this that I was like, okay. He says he views the starting rotation, feels that it's a much better rotation than it was a year ago. And that's obviously pretty interesting because, you know, I wouldn't say it's interesting. Like, I think he's bugging. I think he's actually he's got a valid point. Because you think about it, they went into last year getting a Sevy on a 1-year deal where we didn't know how that was going to turn out. Shamanaya, a lot of people didn't like Shamanaya, right? He kind of struggled with the San Francisco Giants, had a nice year with the Padres, but then kind of struggled in the playoffs for the Padres in 2022. You didn't know what you were going to get from him. He comes in, does a complete 180, and has earned himself a nice deal that the Mets gave, and he's back with us. And a lot of people are now saying, yo, he should be our ace. So you have that. I mean, you didn't know what you were going to get out of Tyler McGill. I mean, Tyler McGill is a different question mark. I know he kind of struggled, but you had that. So you kind of had Sevy, you kind of had Manaya, then you had McGill, you had the situation with Senga. There was a lot of question marks. David Peterson with an amazing year that I'm looking forward to seeing what he does in this year, coming off a beautiful year. You had some up and downs in that rotation. So I think now he's looking at it from a standpoint where, it's a little bit of an upgrade where he's still taking chances. The only thing that I wouldn't say is an upgrade for me is a Sevy and a Frankie Montas. I think they could have kept Sevy, even though they possibly didn't believe that Sevy he was worth that much. But I think he's a much better player than Frankie Montas. Now, I could be saying that now, and then he could make me eat my words and just have an amazing year. And I'm gonna be like, God damn, like those two pitchers that they have brought in from last year and this year where we didn't like at all, and they've completely turned it around for themselves. What the hell are they doing in this pitching lab, man? We got to find out. So that could also be a factor. But it's interesting to see how he says, like, listen, I like this rotation a lot than I did last year. I'm sure the confidence booster is there. They got probably a lot of confidence in Senga to kind of come back and do what he needed to do. Obviously, with Manaya being a much better pitcher than he was last year, he was phenomenal last year. They want him to take an even bigger step and be much better than that. They're interested in seeing how Clay Holmes turns out. I mean, you're taking him from the bullpen and you're putting him in your rotation as a starter. I'm sure they like what they've seen from him in terms of pitch mix, how his velocity looks, how he's throwing the ball on every stride. So there's a lot of good things that they probably see where they're looking at it from a standpoint where it's like, we were kind of like, all right, let's just they were looking at last year's rotation in a sense of putting it on the wall and see what sticks. This year, I could kind of see how that works because you don't know what you're going to get out of Montas and Clay Holmes, but I'm sure they kind of feel confident more on that than they did last year with the rotation. So you have that. Let's see what else I can come into. Obviously, he says coming into camp with everybody on good health. Yes, hopefully we don't get hit by the injury bug consistently and everybody is healthy throughout the year. Obviously, you're not going to have that, right? But you're going to be in a situation. We're hoping for a situation where guys are mostly healthy throughout the entire season and we don't really have to deal with injuries. Has also talked about Christian Scott, said that Christian Scott won't be ready to pitch this year. Obviously, he's still dealing with the Tommy John, but they're looking for him to be ready next year. So that's a good thing in case you're looking to bring him back in the rotation, and you don't have to sign a guy on a 1-year deal. You can get rid of your Griffin Cannings, probably maybe not Tyler McGill, depending on what you want to do with Christian Scott when he comes back. But there's options there to put him in there if you need to. And then the last thing that I do want to talk about is what the notion that everybody says that he doesn't like signing pitchers to a long-term deal, which I also believe. He says understanding the pitcher, the individual, which is a pitcher, and what makes sense for organization, right? So contract structure, if a long-term deal does make sense for the organization when it comes to the pitching rotation, and he says that there's no line drawn in the sand in terms of those type of conversations of giving a pitcher a long-term deal. And says that they have philosophy when it comes to that. Now, obviously, the philosophy that I've always believed in, and I think many of you believed in, is that he doesn't like giving long-term deals to pitchers, right? He's kind of opened the door a little bit on that from based on what he was just saying, that depending on if it makes sense and if it is helpful to the organization, if we have to cross that line, we will cross that line. But there's no definitive answer on not doing that. If they get to that realm, they'll get to that realm. And if it fits and it makes sense, they will do it. So that's something fresh. That's something brand new, because we've always said he don't like giving long-term deals to pitchers. So if there is a pitcher out there that they do decide to give a long-term deal, they might do it. I mean, shout out to Paul Skeens, man. Shout out to Paul Skeens, who's on his arbitration contract with the Pittsburgh Pirates, and the Pittsburgh Pirates have never given a long-term deal. Well, I won't say never. I think they gave it to Francisco Laureano, and that never fucking played out. So maybe they look at Paul Skeens like, listen, you're a fucking gem. There's nobody like you, and we want to give you this long-term deal. Or maybe they don't. You know what I'm saying? Maybe Paul Skeens says, I want to test this free agency and I want to see what other team, which a lot of teams are going to be going after him. So his agent better be ready. But maybe the Mets, maybe that could be the one guy that the Mets give a long-term deal. I wouldn't be mad at it. I think he's worth it. That the kid is a fucking stud. You talk about finding pitchers that are one of a kind. He's one of them. He is one of them. So, how that plays out, I don't know. Obviously, I'm focused on this season, but I'm just saying in terms of what he said with that statement, that could very well fit Paul Skeens. So we'll see how that plays out. That can also fit Brandon Sprout. If Brandon Sprout comes up here and completely just balls out to the point where they got to give him a long-term extension. So who knows? Who knows how that plays out? But yeah, man, just some keynotes after watching that, just relating it back to you guys and kind of giving my opinions on that. And yeah, we got to hear from the president of baseball operations and what his opinions were about the deals and the signings, and obviously the whole situation with P and all that, and how he feels, man. But I'm glad that he was able to shed some light. Glad that we were able to hear from him. Obviously, I think he still has some work to do. We have not won a championship with him, so it's not like we're I'm giving him a pass, but you're still kind of holding there. You're holding some type of accountability, because these are things that him and Cohen, these are guys that him and Cohen have brought in. So if it doesn't pan out, you got to hold them accountable. Again, he hasn't done anything yet in terms of bring us a title. So you still got to hold them to that factor. Not all the way. I'm not a negative Met fan where it's like, well, he hasn't done shit, so, fuck him. And it's like, well, the brother has kind of changed things for the positive. We've kind of moved in a positive upper direction. So, you can't really hate on the guy too much, but you can still hold him accountable for certain things, because some of these moves in terms of the bullpen, in terms of, short-term deals, they fall on him. And, you got to hold Steve Cohen accountable too, in terms of how things work out and what they bring in here, because obviously it goes through him as well. So, glad to hear from him. Can't wait for spring training to get started. Can't wait for the baseball season to get started, man. I'm itching for opening day, itching to see Juan Soto take the field in the city, and just can't wait to see how this rotation and how this bullpen, this stacked bullpen at that, how Alvarez pans out, how David Peterson pans out in the second year, how Mark Vientos pans out, and where he's going to be in the lineup after having a monster year last year, and see what happens with the kids, because I think my main focus is that. Obviously we got guys coming in the rotation and guys coming in the bullpen that really want to spot, but that second base right now is important, because what are they going to do with a Jeff McNeil? Is he going to play every day? What are they going to do with Acuna? You know what I'm saying? How is Brett Beatty going to play? With everything that was said in terms of what is going to be done and what needs to be there, and what Mendoza said yesterday, it's going to be very important to see how that plays out. But with that being said, guys, I do appreciate you guys joining and just tuning in and watching the press conference with me. I will have more lives like this, obviously, This one was just kind of a last minute thought. And, I ran home, took an Uber from work. I usually don't take an Uber from work. I take the bus, but I was like, yo, I want to, do this, and this would be dope. So I appreciate the 49, man, the 49 people that were in here watching with me. Appreciate everybody from Queens Baseball, man. Like I said, please follow my guys, the Pope, the accountant, Keith, Chris Torres, AP, and everybody that makes that space popping and makes it what it is, man. Queens Baseball, we are on top. Appreciate you guys. Appreciate my guys, Chris Torres, like I said, and AP. And follow us at the 7 Express Podcast. Follow these dope Met content creators. Please follow Shea and Sons, Subway to Shea, Mets Weekly, Till Mets Do Us Part, Mets Wardy. Please follow those guys, man. Amazing Met content creators, and they post nonstop, man, giving a lot of Met fans information about their opinions on the team and more information on what they know. So please follow those guys, man. I'm your guy David from Top Bunk Sports. Please follow me at Top Bunk on YouTube, X, Instagram, TikTok, and just stay updated with me, man, as we enjoy this ride of basketball and going into the second half and baseball coming up. I appreciate you guys, and I will see you on the next video. Peace.